Hello, everyone. My name is John Spriggins. I'm the general manager here at South Dallas Cultural Center, and this is In the Studio. This is a series that we started uh, probably about a month or so ago, and the nature of the series is to have conversations with artists who are currently making work. And so our goal is to engage with the artists in their studio to talk about their practice, to talk about their life, how things are going for them in this current climate, and to gain some insight about who they are and where they might be going with their work. And so today we have Chesley Williams, who is a good friend and colleague and all around amazing artist, and we're excited to have her today. And so we're going to dive into some questions just to talk with her, get some background about her and her work, and get a little more insight to her practice and what she's doing. Um, the focus and the goal of this is to help people understand that artists are, thinking people. They are problem solvers. They are affected by the world around them, and a lot of what happens around them influence the work that they do. And so we want to learn a little bit about what those things have to do with Chesley and her work. So, welcome, Chesley. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the intro.
For sure. So, just to dive in a little bit, tell us a little bit about who you are and your work. I'm really interested to hear kind of like, I guess, your background. If you can start there, like where did you really start diving into like seriously making art?
So I would say that I like seriously started making art actively when I finished my bachelor's at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches.
Oh,
And so I was making hair accessories. They were little sculptures, little miniature sculptures that were actually made for the hair.
uh-huh.
And I was setting up pop-ups. I was doing that in Denton. I was doing it in Austin. Well, before I got to Denton, I was doing it in Austin
Uh-huh.
because I took a brief period between undergrad and graduate school.
Okay,
And so that's where I think I started to like, as far as my mind really thinking about how to be an artist and what I wanted to make and what I was interested in making. And so that was like the beginning periods of making wearable art. And then so I continued that into when I moved to Denton and then during UNT and then after I graduated. And so definitely after I graduated, I started to make work in the form of exhibition rather than just, pop-up accessories.
gotcha. So my question was around you mentioned you were at Stephen F. Austin, and then you transitioned to UNT. Was that a deal where you transferred there to go study art, or what was the correlation between those two?
Yeah, so I got my first degree, so my bachelor's in fine arts from Stephen F. Austin, so that's a 4-year university.
Gotcha.
And so then I took a respite, really only 6 months, and
Uh,
then I went straight into graduate school, and that
gotcha.
was a 3-year program.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you studied what at UNT?
At UNT, I primarily focused on fiber arts, and so
Gotcha.
um, working with textiles and still bringing in my sculptural background from bachelor my bachelor
Gotcha.
days
Okay.
because I'm very
Okay.
much still into sculpture, but just mostly working with textile, soft materials.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Um, what drew you to sculpture? We see artists that work in all different kinds of media, but I think to me, sculptors, people who work in 3 dimensions, have a certain penchant for, the, the feel and the touch in space. So what was it about that that drew you to making 3D, and even further than that, to go into fiber?
Well, I'm very much into like tactile, textured, qualities within works.
Mhm.
Even if it was like two-dimensional, I was more drawn towards things that had that sort of implied texture. But for me personally, when it came to sculpture, it was just the way my brain functioned. I was able to, think more three-dimensionally, and there was such like a hands-on process, to where the sketching was the material study, and playing with it that I enjoyed more than, say if I were to be like a drawer, which I wasn't very good at. um, and so that was also why I led to three-dimensional. Um, but yeah, like I love playing in space, in physical space. I love the idea of transforming a physical space, through sculpture or through installation. And so, I mean, that's yeah, that's where my love is that transformation.
Got you. Okay. All right. Um, I know this is a question that may, some people may feel some kind of way about it, but I think it's still important. Um, and I think it's important for anyone who's a creative. But um, how does gender and ethnicity play a role in the art that you make? In the sense of, like, does it, inform your work, or does it not? And if it does, how do those things come into play?
Yeah, so gender definitely plays a role in my work. And one thing is that, I know both genders are interested in fashion,
Mhm.
but for me, there's like a femininity quality to like what I'm making. I'm first of all, I'm thinking about myself as a woman and how I want to be presented through this, object of accessorizing oneself. And so, um, yeah, so that's always been a part of my work. I think that as far as, how gender like plays a role, the idea of dressing up and just accessorizing in general. And then as far as like my ethnicity, that's played a role like in two, two bodies of work for me.
Mhm.
As far as like thinking about, or not thinking about, but the subject matter being the hair. And so I talked about, my hair journey, as a Black woman, growing up from childhood to early adult, and just, dealing with like various, topics as it relates to the hair. Um, and in a public world, as well as in a private world, and what that like transformed into, and then currently into like the Tino project. That too is about, particularly Black ethnicity, and that I'm talking about a historical event that affected a certain group of ethnic people. And so I think that's how both femininity or gender and ethnicity take a role in my work. I don't necessarily lead with that, with those concepts within my work. It just comes, like I was interested in fashion, I was interested in the head wrap, and so that's, you know there you have it.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about Black history.
Right. 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 And for those who may not know about the Tino Project, we were fortunate enough to have you exhibit the project here at South Dallas Cultural Center, and it was an amazing exhibition. There was part collaboration with yourself and another artist, J.D. Moore, um, that took place in the exhibition. But it was a series of photographs that you choreographed with your head wrap. And so could you give us a little insight to what Tino is and help understand just kind of where you were going and the journey you took to create that project?
Yeah. So, yeah, the Tignon project is really special in that it's one of my favorite bodies of work that I've ever done, just on a conceptual basis. You know, discovering, not discovering, but finding history as it relates to the head wrap, particularly like in North America. And so, what I did with the Tignon project is I research context surrounding the Tignon law and use that research and context to formulate a visual exhibition in which I was referencing drawings and paintings featuring Black women during the 18th century that wasn't necessarily affected directly by the Tignon law, just because those paintings or drawings weren't based on Louisiana or Creole culture, but on other cultures around the world. And then juxtapose that with essays in which I could talk about individual experiences and contexts surrounding the Tignon law. And so that took form of like photographs. There was 8 total. And then there was head wraps, over 50. They're all different to showcase like the individuality and creativity of these women. And then a video, a documentary, a short documentary in which emphasized like the workshops and how I developed like this interactive educational setting for people to not only learn about the history, but then also learn personal styling techniques with the head wrap.
Yeah, it was an amazing project. It was one of our higher visited exhibitions as well. And I think it left an impression on me, but I think our visitors as well, to learn that history, and then also the way you presented it was really amazing, a project. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Are you still working or in that vein, or have you decided to take a different path, currently?
So I'm still, as far as the body of work itself, I'm still pushing it, as far as trying to get it exhibited.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's lined up to travel the first time out of Texas to Duluth, Minnesota next year. Yes, that's super exciting. And then as far as like thinking about directions where I want to go next, so I love like the conceptual historical side of that project the most, as far as researching. And so I think that aspect is going to stay with me as an artist as I continue to make more work. And I'm still very much interested in like the 18th century. I mean, this started like, a decade ago when I was like, fascinated with like French culture and Marie Antoinette. And so that part of me still remains. And so now, and so now after doing the Tignon, there was so many different events and subject matters that was briefly touched on that I would love to expand and, really make it like a holistic exhibition to where one day, like the Tignon can also be included into a grander exhibition theme. And so right now I'm looking at like emancipation, as it relates to both North American history, Great Britain, France, and Spain, because all 3 of those subject matters were within the Tignon project, but again, were just briefly touched on. And I would love to expand that conversation and just see how I can present that visually interesting,
Yeah.
while still like maintaining like, that very heavy context that's within that subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that sounds like it could be a really interesting journey for you. I think when you presented your work, the research that you did suited the work really well because it came out in every aspect of the exhibition. It wasn't just this presentation of head wraps. If anyone saw the exhibition, you were very thoughtful about how you presented the work. The map right at the beginning as you walk into the space, and then the imagery in the photographs, and then even the arrangement of the head wrap. All the colors, but the context that you provided, I think, was really insightful, and I think it gave people a history lesson, for lack of a better way to put it, that wow, there's more to this than what we even thought, particularly, the context of here. Because when we I think about head wraps, I think about, honestly, Erica's Badu's appropriation of it, early on in her career, but that obviously it has roots in Africa, and still is a part of, different cultures there in terms of, whether it's daily or it's for special occasions, but that it had a history here, a very distinct and unique history here. But that those things tie back to other cultures, and that you had all these other little pieces to help create the puzzle, that became the Tignon exhibition. So I'm excited to see where you're about to go, with the work. Um, I think your level of and thoughtfulness, I think, really came through in that exhibition. So good job.
Yeah.
Um, I want to pivot a little bit in terms of like where you are, in your career. You are an educator, and you teach in higher ed. And I'm curious about how what you do, how that as an artist influences what you do as an educator. Tell us about some of the subjects that you teach, and what you bring to your students in the classroom.
Yeah, so I've been teaching as an art professor, mostly art appreciation for the past 6 years now,
Mm-hmm.
for various colleges, Corsicana, Dallas, and Tarrant County. So
Mm-hmm.
that typical, adjunct lifestyle of teaching. And so with art appreciation as the main topic that I teach, it involves research, and little did I know how much I would actually fall in love with that. It was definitely a struggle in the beginning, but over the years, I've really enjoyed the subject matter in and of itself, and the students that I come across, especially ones that are not art majors. I mostly am engaging with people that are seeking degrees outside of the creative industry. Mostly like medical, engineering, public safety, careers of that nature. And so, being able to introduce art to these individuals and show them how it can be a part of their personal and professional lifestyle has been a real joy. And again, it requires, researching and finding relational materials that can convey that message to them to where they would hopefully, become future, art advocates. And so that has definitely influenced my work in that I seek to not just, appeal to people that, are artists, but also appeal to people that are interested in history and yeah, who are also interested in history, which I think everyone is. I mean,
Yeah,
who doesn't like a story?
right.
Um, and so, but yeah, like art, like the educator side has influenced my work tremendously in that I am more about context, conceptual context, incorporating that into my work.
I think that's important. I spent some time doing the same thing as an adjunct professor. And one of the things that and to your point, one of the things that I came to realize is like this is an opportunity to develop and grow patronage,
Mhm.
and grow people's interest in art, so that they'll attend, galleries and exhibitions and maybe even purchase art, for themselves, and support the art community as a whole. And so, yeah, I think what you do in the classroom, plays a really important and vital role to the livelihood of the arts, to help people understand that this is an important part of our life, our history, our communities. So kudos to you for continuing to do that work. Um, so one of the things that I'm always interested in is like inspiration. And I know inspiration can come from all kinds of places. But I often ask artists, like, whose work are you paying attention to, or whose work have you paid attention to in time that has maybe inspired you or had some kind of influence? And it doesn't have to be a long list of people or anything, but like if there are any artists that off the top of your head that you say, um, these are the people that I'm paying attention to. These are the people whose work I think inspires me to continue to do the work that I'm doing. Are there any folks out there that you think about?
Well, I just recently visited Tally Dunn's gallery specifically to see Leonardo's Drew's work.
Yeah.
I've been a lover of his work ever since I came across him when I was in undergrad in Nacogdoches.
Hmm.
And so it's always a thrill to see his work in person. Um, like the simplicity of his materials, and the way that he plays with pattern and texture is like a constant inspiration for me, especially because I, I'm being pulled in like two different directions when it comes to making art. I love the idea of just making simple things that aren't complicated as far as like having to like add so much context to it, where there's just like a simple focus on shape and texture. And so I like looking at artists that work that way. Um, and so people like Ilanatsu, I'm still
Hmm.
very much a fan of his work. But then there's also like the conceptual side that I'm interested in too, just like philosophies, also um, inspire me as an artist. And so if I can come across artists' work that deal with like a combination of like pattern and texture on top of like concept, I'm all for that. And so I don't do too much as I did in the past when it comes to, I guess, finding direct inspiration from artists themselves,
Sure.
but rather, looking at what's around me and being inspired by that, conversations, historical philosophies, current philosophies, those types of things is what I look to as an artist currently when it comes to inspiration. But I'm always looking at artists. I have like a special Instagram page just to like focus on that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, I I've had a few conversations with some local artists around Dallas, um, and one of the things that um, I found recently is that some of the younger artists, emerging artists, are there's this like fear of having their work associated with anybody else's. Like they're after that definitive work, they're after that originality, and all of those things. And so when I ask them that question, there's this shrugging off of, well, I don't really look at anybody's work, or I don't really pay any attention to anybody else's stuff. You know, my work is unique and it's different and all those things. And I get it. You know, I completely understand that side of it. But there's I personally feel that there's an importance to knowing um, something about the art that's being made, either art historically or contemporarily. Like who else is out there and what they've done, and it's not a matter of their ideas or their approach creeping into your work. I think it's a matter of being aware that we don't create work in a vacuum, you know, and
Mhm.
that we're influenced by all kinds of things, and that those people made work for the purpose of us learning from it.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you teach. Is part of the reason why you teach is that, you know, art is educational as well as inspirational, as well as creative, as well as inventive, as well as problem solving, and even life changing. It's all those things, and we can be informed by those people who are making work and doing work and have had some level of success or not. But we can learn from it, and I think it's a tool for learning as an artist. So that's the
Absolutely.
reason why I asked that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important for artists to study other artists. Just even like, because I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing new created under the sun, you know?
Sure.
And so, you know, there, and oftentimes it's not needed for you to try and reinvent the wheel when it comes to certain aspects of being an artist, you know,
Right.
especially logistically and strategically, as far as how you move about in your career choices. And so it's important to look at other artists, especially for, you know, what were some of their career moves? You know, what was some of their career paths? Do I
Right.
want to go down those same paths? Is that really what I want for myself as an artist? And so that's why it's even more important using art as an educational tool to help you as an individual artist understand and map out your own plan, but taking in consideration of learning what other people's plans were and deciding on what will work for you and won't work for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Um, in your efforts to, you know, continue to expand on the work that you're doing, are there any goals you have in the next year or so, you know, in terms of your work or your practice?
Yes, definitely the research, you know. I'm hoping to really flush out um, you know, a good essay or two per each um, country when it comes to emancipation. And
Okay.
then from there, that would help me determine what materials will follow. Because right now, I have no idea visually what materials I want to work with.
Mhm.
What I think I know I want to work with text a lot, and I don't know how that will visualize itself as far as text itself. There's just so many ways to play around with text, you know, whether it's like embroidery, making molds of letters, you know, repetition and pattern. I'm really not sure yet.
Mhm.
Um, and so definitely finishing the research component first and you know seeing what sort of things pop out as far as like materials that are associated to those particular events
Mhm.
could really help me understand like where I want to go next physically in making the work.
Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. Um, so, any details about this show that's happening in I think you said Minnesota? Or
Yeah, so Duluth, Minnesota. So I have been talking with them for quite some time.
Mhm.
And so we were actually scheduled to have the exhibition in the fall, but COVID happened.
Mhm.
And so we did a virtual exhibition where I did voice recordings of the essays, and we used a platform called Smartify. And so that sort of like substituted for the fall. But there's been like great response, and there's funding available. And so, yeah, we're looking to hopefully ship out. I don't know when, if it's going to be like when I'm sending the work, it's either in late January or early February, and go from there. But yeah, it'll be the first time it's going out of Texas.
Fantastic. I couldn't remember if you had a catalog or not, but have you produced a catalog of the show?
I have not produced a catalog of the show.
Okay.
It's definitely something in the horizon for sure, especially now that I'm trying to make it travel outside of Texas. I think that would be a good component.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, you have it's a really solid body of work, and with the writing, the component that you have with it, I think, and all the research that you've done, um, you have all the elements necessary to make a
I need
catalog.
a
So,
forward. I need a forward.
yeah. That was it because, and I thought about that part too. 'Cause I just did one for Riley Holloway,
Okay, yeah.
and I just find all of those things kind of interesting. Trying to put something like that together, but at some point, I would love to see a catalog and from this particular exhibition, and I would be in line ready to purchase one because I think it's an exceptional show and body of work. Um, well, I won't take too much more of your time. I like to end my interviews, in the studio interviews, conversations with a question, the same question, and it is essentially, um, if you were looking back and having a conversation with your younger self, and had the opportunity to sit yourself down at whatever age or whatever point, knowing what you know and all the things you've learned, what kind of advice would you have given yourself? If you like, hey, sit down, Chesley, let's have a conversation, let's talk. So what would that look like?
So that would probably look more in terms of me, I guess offering the advice of charting your own path, as far as like not trying to align yourself to an institutional type of pathway when it comes to being an artist. That's one of my biggest things that I think needs to get across for artists that are especially attending a traditional route, um, as we say, in becoming an artist, is going to a school, whether it's undergrad or graduate school. We can oftentimes get tunnel vision and stuck when it comes to what success looks like and what it should be like based on this institutionalized perspective. And so I think it's really important to really charter a path that works for yourself individually. As I said before, study other artists, not just for their work, but also for, their path, look at their CVs and, see if that is a direction that you want to go in, and understand that, there's more than one way to get to the top of that mountain, and that mountain is defined by you. Because, again, success looks different for everyone, and nor should it be the same for everyone, but just understand that, it's okay to have a different plan, to
Yeah,
have a different outlook on what it is to be an artist, that maybe doesn't look like what everyone else is doing around you.
awesome, awesome. I love it. I love it. I think that is excellent advice. I think young Chesley would be greatly impacted and appreciative of having uh, uh, that information to guide her towards wherever it is she wants to go. Um, Well, Chesley, thank you so much for taking time to have a conversation with us. Um, this is, again, a part of our In the Studio series. We will be having more conversations with artists of different backgrounds and different experiences. But this is definitely, I think, been enlightening. And we want to continue to support you and your work. So please keep us informed about where you are, what you're doing, any projects. Definitely when you get things nailed down about Duluth, to put that out into the atmosphere and let us know so we can help promote it and get the word out about what's going on with you. But we appreciate you. We love you, and we have a great deal of respect for the work that you're doing. And you just keep it up, and we'll look forward to seeing some great things coming out in the future.
Thank you, John. It's been
For
a
sure.
pleasure. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day. This has been In the Studio at South Dallas Cultural Center. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.